major concept that shows up on the SAT math sections quite a bit is something called solving for linear equalities, or the equation of a line. So basically, the idea that what you're dealing with is a linear equation, and that describes, in the coordinate plane, it describes a line. But it also, in the real world, describes how people interact with real world objects. And so that's why so many word problems involve linear equations. So let's take a look at the way they do this on the SAT. Once again, we're going to be using official SAT practice test number 2, originally released in 2015. And so this is a real SAT math problem. Let's take a look at it. It's number 3 in section 4. So the first thing we see is an equation. L equals 24 plus 3.5m. All right, now what are we supposed to do with this? Well, luckily they give us a word problem so that we can figure out what to do. One end of a spring is attached to a ceiling. When an object of mass m kilograms is attached to the other end of the spring stretches to a length of L centimeters, as shown in the equation above. What is m when L is 73? So this is a standard 2-variable equation, a very typical linear equation. Normally, if you're just dealing with it in theory in an Algebra 1 class, it would be x and y, but here we have m and L. M in the place of the x variable and L in the place of the y variable, the one for which you want to solve. But interestingly, they give you the variable L in terms of a real number. So interestingly, they give you a real number for the variable L. So interestingly, they give you a real number for the variable L. In this case, 73. So what we can do is, and again, we're going to talk about this more in terms of strategy if you're working with a tutor, but just for a really quick way to do this, you just want to plug in 73 for L and treat it like you would any other mathematical problem and solve for m, because that's the question. What is m? It's going to be one of these, so let's solve for it. And the way you do this is what's known as balancing the equation or simplifying. So we're going to subtract 24 from each side. Now you can use a calculator to do this on section 4, but I can't show you a calculator right here. So I'm just going to do it like an elementary or middle school student would, which is often faster on the SAT. So using borrowing and renaming, or whatever they call it in elementary school these days with the new math, we end up with this. Now, because we're dealing with decimals here, you probably want to use a calculator. You can do this without a calculator, but luckily this is section number 4, which is the section where you're allowed to use a calculator. Anytime where you're using, probably where you're encountering decimals or fractions, you probably want to use a calculator. So in order to simplify, we have to divide out the 3.5 to get the m by itself. And of course, 49 divided by 3.5 is probably a little bit too challenging to do in your head. So use a calculator, just like I did, and you come up with a result. Now we can look and see which answer choice matches what we came up with, and there you go, it's answer choice A. So as always, when it comes to linear equations, write it down and then work through it to simplify it as much as possible until you get to an answer. In this case, we're evaluating based on an actual value.